Malaysia-China Chamber of Commerce (MCCC) was established in 1990 as a non-governmental, non-profit, multi-ethnic and independent business association. MCCC provides a dynamic platform for Malaysian and Chinese entrepreneurs to create a mutually beneficial environment for business cooperation, enhancing the national economy and boosting enterprise development.
马中总商会创会的前辈一开始就给我们这个商会很清楚的定位，它是设计马来西亚各族的商家有兴趣到中国经贸和投资的一个总会。未来的两国的一个发展的新动力，必然是来自高科技，包括于人才的培养。
马中总商会青年团是在2003年4月份成立，并在2018年我们改名为青年企业家委员会青企会，以更贴近企业家的形象。作为青年的商业平台，青企会也通过举办各种各样的活动，让他们装备好自己，迎接更多的商机。
我觉得21世纪女企业家通过这个平台走出马来西亚，然后走入全中国。我们不只是要学习如何做一个成功的女企业家，更重要的是我们要如何成为一个更有价值的女企业家。
As a platform for connecting private enterprises and government resources, the MCCC has been maintaining close contact with the government departments of the two countries to ensure the exchange of resources and projects, domestic and foreign investment opportunities, encouraging and implementing the international expansion strategy.
马中关系源远流长，经过了45年的这个紧密合作，经贸之间的这个成长，马中的关系呢更上一层楼。我们在未来展望双边友好邦国的关系，朝向新的里程碑迈进。
As a platform for international interaction, the professional teams of the association and the 9 state administrative branches have successfully encouraged numerous numbers of Chinese investors to collaborate with local entrepreneurs over the years.
MCCC being a focused China-Malaysia trade organization, it opens up a new avenue for us to look at trading with China. China is a country that we cannot ignore. It's humongous and the trade opportunities are big.
MCCC not only enables Malaysian entrepreneurs to experience the prosperity of Malaysia-China business, but also enables the Chinese entrepreneurs to experience the diversity of Malaysian culture. This has boosted the confidence of cooperating with local businesses, therefore strengthening trade development. In order to truly understand China's economic status, MCCC led local entrepreneurs on a visit to the commercial hub in Nanjing, China, and to meet the local entrepreneurs there. MCCC started a course related to the investments in China and Malaysia, organizing the One Belt, One Road English Forum. MCCC also organized a Greater Glory 45th anniversary of Malaysia-China diplomatic relations to celebrate the close relations and the rich historical ties, to further encourage the economic development and maintain the high accelerated growth between Malaysia and China.
马中总商会自1990年成立以来，积极地发挥桥梁和纽带的作用。今天的中马关系已经进入了新的历史阶段，必将迎来更大的发展机遇和更广阔的发展空间。
The rapid growth and increase of business activities in China make it a globally coveted market. Malaysia's strength lies in its stable, growing economy and multicultural environment.
3, 2, 1.
对于马中总商会未来的发展，马中总商会一定要尽量的有一个机制来够授权给我们的各个委员会、各州的州分会，让他们有这个领域、有这个舞台去表现他们各自的才华。这一点是我们这个总商会会成功的一个要素。
Regardless of the business nature, choosing only the strongest and advanced platform is the most effective method to venture into any foreign market.
Duyên,
Kaptun, your mic not on. Kaptun, your mic.
Yeah.
Mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. 大家晚上好。Salam sejahtera. Welcome to Post-Budget 2021 Dialogue Session organized by Malaysia-China Chamber of Commerce, MCCC. I'm Kok Tun from Business, Economic and Investment Committee of MCCC. I'll be your moderator for tonight's dialogue session. We are indeed very pleased to have 4 learned panelists to share their thoughts on Malaysia Budget 2021 announced last Friday by Finance Minister. First, Mr. Kelong Seng, Vice President of MCCC, who need no further introduction, as he is a popular figure with a very interesting life and colorful career, from journalists to being planters to developers and holding various senior positions in many companies. He is currently a CEO coach with Vistage Malaysia. Welcome, Mr. Ke.
Thank you.
Next, we have Dr. Muhammad Sharin Madros, who is the principal at Global Entrepreneur Exchange and an adjunct professor at UKM Graduate School of Business. He has with him over 20 years of experience in local and international oil and gas companies. He was an EXCO member of the Malaysia Oil and Gas Services Council, MOGSC, and played a very important role in setting up the Malaysia Petroleum Resource Corporation, or MPRC. He was also the CEO of Matrade from 2017 to 2019. Thank you, Dr. Sharin, for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Alan Tan, a good friend of mine, who is the Chief Economist of Affin Hwang Investment Bank, a position he held since 2008. Alan regularly published economic reports, particularly that of macroeconomic analysis, and he also is a specialist in running economic forecasting model. He often engaged fund managers, investors, both local and foreign, including that of sovereign funds. Alan graduated with master degree in economics from University of Memphis, USA. Alan,
Hi.
are you on the line?
Yes.
Yeah,
thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Hi.
Yep. Thank you for accepting MCC's invitation for being tonight's panelist. And last but not least, Mr. Kong Meng En, SME consultant specialist with over 20 years of experience providing consultancy to SMEs in area of strategic planning and equity planning, particularly that of manufacturing, construction, multimedia, wholesale, trade and retail sectors. Mr. Kong is member of Malaysia Institute of Accountants, MIA, and also member of Chartered Tax Institute of Malaysia, CTIM. Very colorful character as well. Welcome, Mr. Kong.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Thanks.
Welcome again, and thank you for accepting MCCC's invitation to be our panelist tonight. If I may start the session by quoting the extract of press statement made by MCCC, they welcome the budget 2021 as a deficit-driven expansionary budget necessary to spur growth during this trying time. The MCCC also applaud the government's expansionary budget to sustain our economy in the current economic situation. It is important, however, that the level of debt to GDP ratio be managed well. The government has to be disciplined to revert to a more credible debt ratio level when things turn for better. The Chamber also welcomed the special incentives for FDI, including various tax incentives at various levels, including at company, personal level, a strategic incentive initiative for targeted FDI. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with that background that I would like to invite Mr. Kirk to share his thoughts on a broader perspective on the recent announced budget for 2021. Mr. Kirk, the forum is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for your kind introduction. Because of the time factors constraint, I will just bring up a few important points in our budget 2021. Can you ask our secretariat to show my slides, please? Yes. As you mentioned, Khotun, that we are having an expansionary budget this time, as we are facing very serious COVID-19 pandemic throughout the whole world, and it has created very serious negative impact on all the economies in the world, especially in the United States and Latin American countries, and also European countries. Asia also, of course, affected very badly, including Malaysia. And therefore, while confronting this very unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic, we have to come out with a very unprecedented expansionary budget as well. And therefore, you will see that from the slide here, that we have the largest budget so far. Can you see the slide? If you see that 2021, our total budget allocation is 322.5 billion ringgit. Okay, far more than the previous years. All right. And from here, you see that, of course, when we have such a large budget, we need to have income to overcome our deficit problems. So if you see the next slide, please. This budget here, you can see that there is some improvements comparing with the previous ones. For example, we have a larger portion of the budget goes to development expenditure. Previously, it's always less than 20% of our budget goes to the development expenditure. But this year, we have more than 20%. If you see the blue color one is 26.2%, 26.2%. But at the same time, you will see that our expenditure, oh, I'm sorry, I say it wrongly. their development expenditure is more than 20%. That's right. Yes. But at the same time, we're also facing another problem, and that is the operating expenditure. The operating expenditure in the past, about one third goes to pay the government servants' salaries, and also the retirement benefits. Of course, the government service is overstaffed. Everyone knows that, and we cannot simply retrench them. So the figure is still very high. This is another problem that we are facing. So when we have such a huge budget this year compared to the previous years, if you look on the left-hand side, where is the money going to come from? Basically, mainly from the direct tax and the indirect tax. Direct tax mainly consists of companies tax and personal tax. My concern is from this budget, we cannot see any strategy, creative or new collection methods. There is none. So are we going to be able to overcome our deficit? So you see the next slide, please. Since 1998, after the Asia financial crisis, we have suffered a negative budget every year since 1998. And we have accumulated a big debts, national debts. So we can see that from 2015, we have only 160.3 billion US dollars, and slowly increased to 2020 this year, we have 218.2 billion US dollars. And by next year, it's projected to have about 231.7 billion US dollars. So our national debt is accumulating and is growing larger and larger. So this is another problem that we are facing, and we should try to reduce these debts. In fact, before 2019, our government has been trying to reduce our national debt, but because of this pandemic, we go up again the national debt. And also, because of this expansionary budget, we are also facing a fiscal deficit. And you see that from 2021, next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yes. You see that the fiscal deficit to GDP in 2015 is minus 3.2. Then 2016, 3.1. 2017, 3. So it's reducing every year by a small margin though. Then 2018 increased to 3.7. 2019, 3.4%. And this year, we are expecting to have a 6% fiscal deficit. 2021, next year, we are having a 5.4% fiscal deficit compared to our GDP. Right. So we are maintaining this deficit continuously every year. This is another concern. Right. Now, when we say that our deficit, fiscal deficit of 3%, 5% to 6%, why do we say this is very serious? Because if you compare with other ASEAN countries, next slide, please. Out of these 6 major economies in the ASEAN countries, you see that Malaysia's budget deficit is 3.31%. Singapore is the only one in these 6 major economies in ASEAN. It's 3.72, Singapore. Indonesia also minus 1.75. Thailand plus 0.06 only. Vietnam minus 1.96. Philippines 1.63. So if you compare with other 6 major ASEAN countries, our deficit is the highest, 3.31%, right? Now, how about internationally? We are talking internationally. Next slide, please. Now, you will compare with other advanced economies, for example, USA. USA also have a very high deficit figures, is 5.68. China, 4.66. Germany is plus 1.4. UK is minus 2.1. France is minus 3. Japan is 2.45. Italy, 1.6. Spain, 2.8. Russia, 2.91. So either internationally or regionally, we are actually having a very high budget deficit. Very high, right? Comparatively very high. All right. So, however, this year's budget still forecasts that by next year, our economy will be okay. All right. Look at this forecast here. 2018, we have 4.7 growth rate. 2019, we have 4.3% growth rate. And this year, 2020, we are going to suffer a 4.5% negative growth. 4.5% negative growth, all right? But next year, our budget forecast to have 6.5 to 7.5% growth, positive growth, all right? So in other words, our economy will be enjoying a V-shaped rebound by next year, all right? Okay, some people say that this is too optimistic. How can we achieve a V-shaped rebound by next year? So let us look at other international bodies' forecast. Yeah. Next slide, please. All right. You see the IMF, this 2020 forecast to have a minus of 4.4% negative growth. And next year, IMF, International Monetary Fund, forecasting that we are going to enjoy a 5.2% increase, 5.2% plus. And 2022, 3.5% increase. World Bank forecast this year will suffer 4.9% negative growth, but next year we're going to have 5.5 positive growth. Asia Development Bank forecast this year minus 5%, but next year 6% positive growth. Yeah? And then Focus Economics forecast by 2021 we are having 6.6% positive growth also, and 2022 reduced to 4.7%. Development Bank of Singapore forecast this year negative 5.5. Next year, also positive growth of 6. So you see that either our local banks or our government finance department or the international organizations all forecasting that our economy will enjoy a V-shaped rebound by next year. Yeah, and it's quite a sharp V-shaped rebound. But of course, depend on a lot of other factors also. For example, our oil price. Okay, which doctor, you can add in more opinions or comments on this issue. Next slide, please. Oil is oh, sorry. Next, what is it? Next one. Yes, this one. Yes, correct. Okay. Oil has been a very important commodity as far as we are concerned. Previously, it has contributed about 40% or even more than 40% of our revenue, but then reduced to now about only 20%. About 20%. Therefore, the oil price will play a very important role in our economic development. All right. So, how do we forecast the next year's oil price? Well, let's see the next slide. IMF, International Monetary Fund. Next slide, please. No, next one. Next. Mix up already. Yes. Okay. Oil price. IMF forecast this year average about $36.9 per barrel. But next year will be slightly increased to 39.5 US dollars per barrel. World Bank forecast this year average at 41 US dollars per barrel. Next year increase slightly to 44 US dollars per barrel. EIA this year 41.42, next year 49.53. In other words, all these three organizations forecast that next year our petrol price will be slightly higher than this year. So in other words, it's good for us, but it is not high enough. Yeah, it's still considered as very low. 40, 30 odd dollars to 40 is still very low, considered low. Remember that previously we enjoyed about 80 ringgit, 80 US dollars per barrel, or sometimes even go up more than 100 US dollars per barrel. That is called, we call it good, but this is considered low, although it is better than last year and this year. Okay, this is one factor that will affect us. If the oil price can go up far more than this, then we will certainly be able to achieve a higher growth rate. This is one of the factors. The other one is of course the pandemic. We have to see that how serious is a pandemic going to develop further. At the moment, slide please. You go to the next one. Yes. Okay, this one, if you see from this map here, you will see that at the moment the pandemic is very badly affected in the US and Latin America, and also European countries. And in Asia, only India is very serious. Next one, of course, is Indonesia, all right? But overall, you can see that whole Asia, other than India, for example, China, in ASEAN and ASEAN countries, most of us are doing quite well. We contain the virus pretty well. This is another factor that could affect us. At this moment, of course, Malaysia is doing very badly. All right, we have more than 3 figures, sometimes 4 figures, new cases in a day, right? But compared to USA, for example, in one day, in the past 7 days, they have 100 odd cases, 100,000, and the highest record is 126,000 cases in a day, all right? So that is very bad. But we expect that by next year, or even by December this year, I think the vaccine from China can be introduced in the market. And therefore, the pandemic should be able to contain, or getting better slowly. But definitely not immediately, because only by next year, I think by the second half of the year, the whole pandemic can be controlled. And therefore, these two factors, the oil price, the pandemic containment, how good it is, will affect the result of our forecast. But of course, one very good news is, last slide, please. Next one. Next, yes. This is very important. In 2020 first quarter, this year, first quarter, first time in the history that ASEAN countries overtook Europe countries and USA to become China's largest trading partner. It was very difficult for you to take it that ASEAN countries, all these 10 developing countries, our trade with China can overtake Europe and USA and become China's largest trading partner. Very difficult for you to understand, right? But it is a fact. And even second quarter, and it's forecast that for whole year, in the year of 2020, the whole year, ASEAN will become China's largest trading partner. Why is it so important? Because in ASEAN, out of these 10 countries, Malaysia is China's, out of these 10 countries, Malaysia is China's largest trading partner. All right. And of course, China is our largest trading partner also. All right. And you know that since this year, early this year, from April onwards, China has started to open up. All right. And they started to back to normal. Their factories start to open and workers go back to work. Right. So they have started almost back to normal now. Almost back to normal. And therefore, IMF forecast that in the whole world in 2020, only one country's economy will be enjoying positive growth. And the others, more than 190 countries, will be suffering a negative growth in 2020. And that country that enjoyed the positive growth is China. So we repeat again, China is our largest trading partner. All right. And ASEAN countries is China's largest trading partner. This is a very important point. And so we are quite confident that our trade with China, right, and also with ASEAN countries will be growing steadily in 2020. And by 2021, we will be able to enjoy a positive GDP growth. All right. Okay. Thank you, Kok Tun. That is what I want to present today. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kirk, for your very in-depth analysis of the macro level of what's happening out there. If I hear you correctly, this is one of the biggest budget ever with 322.5 billion ringgit, whereby 303.5 billion ringgit goes into expenditure, 69 billion go into development, which give a pretty high percentage of 22.6%, which I think is one of the highest in history as well, where money is put into development, which hope to bring back some tax from there. 17 billion goes into COVID-19 expenditure. Likewise, your concern is on the deficit to GDP ratios of potentially hitting 6% this year and next year 5.4%. Debt to GDP ratio also creeping up from 54.5 in 2019 to 57 in 2020 and potentially hit 58 in 2021. Now, in one of your pie chart also, you demonstrated that the gap of 26.5% of the total 322.5 billion need funding from borrowing. That translates into 85 billion ringgit borrowing, additional borrowing in 2021 that Malaysia government has to go out to the market to borrow, potentially via MGS and some government bonds. We come back to that later on your concern of the funding part. You also mentioned about the projection of oil price of 42 per barrel used in 2021's budget, and your concern is that it's not high enough to bring in the revenue for the government. Obviously, Dr. Sharin, you're the expert in oil and gas sector, and I believe you also involved in green technology and innovation initiatives. Can you comment on the budget used by the government of $42 per barrel? And I believe Malaysia's oil is slightly higher from the Brent prices, right? Am I right, Dr. Sharin?
Yeah, that's true. Our crude actually is of a higher quality. We have sweet crude over here, so it's a much better crude. Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. So, do you see enough emphasis with your background, obviously, on some of the initiative that you've done, whether it's at university or your career with the oil and gas sector? Do you see enough emphasis put on the areas of innovation? Enough emphasis to grow green technology as highlighted in the budget 2021.
Okay, thank you, Katie, and good evening, everyone. I think it's Personally, I think it's a very interesting budget, and I think we need to look at the budget in a wider context. Yeah, I think it's not fair to look at it in just from a 1 year perspective. I think there are trailing historical factors that's affecting us economically, and that translate into a lot of things. So Kirk talked a bit about oil and gas. Yes, our economy, I think, tied quite a fair bit with oil and gas, yeah, because we have been a producing country for a very long time. And just to cut it short, at one point around 2010, for example, our revenue, government revenue from oil and gas, goes as high as 40+%. So that's how much the oil and gas actually contributed to our economy. And if you remember, in 2010, we also started our economic transformation program in 2010. And from 2010 to 2014, the price was hovering around $100 per barrel. It was a very, very good time for oil and gas. And until about 2014, late 2014, early 2015, the price fell down, collapsed all the way to around $30 per barrel. So from 2014 to 2015, a very sharp fall from 100+ dollars per barrel to around $30 per barrel. And we've been growing incrementally from $30 to $60 per barrel around 2018, 2019, and we've been hovering there. And until 2019, when we were around $60, $50 to $60 per barrel, then we had by January, Wuhan occurs. Pandemic in Wuhan is somewhere around December of 2019. We start seeing the impact of COVID from around 4 months after Wuhan, around March. That's when we started our own lockdown and so on, and the price goes all the way down, even all the way to $20 per barrel. And then it shoot up again. It rebounded from $20 per barrel to around $30+ per barrel. And we've been hovering between $30 to $40 per barrel. That's where we are now. Yeah. So if you look from that historic perspective, our economy and our budget, to some extent, you can see it also reflects in terms of how much money we have, how much funds we are having, and how much the economy is impacting. And back in 2010, there was a conscious effort actually by the government to reduce our dependency on oil. So actually from 2010 to 2015, from 40+% contribution from oil, we reduced it to around 28 to 30% of our revenue coming from oil. So government actually consciously reduced the dependency on oil by about around 2015. And then when you have all these economic circumstances coming in play, so after we had the price of oil crash, and that's very much because of shale boom in America. And then after that, we got another series of environmental concerns that's putting pressure on oil, moving away from carbon fuel. And then we had another trade war going on, again putting the pressure into the global economy. And now we have COVID. So in fact, we have a series of crises, if you like. So this particular budget that we are facing is kind of unique in the sense that we are caught right in the middle of a very perfect storm, because we have like 4 crises behind us. And when you look at a country like us that is dependent on oil in terms of our revenue, and we are a trading nation, our trade is about 1.2 than our GDP. So we are a trading nation, and the world trade slows down. So our economy affected. And then COVID come in, and that restricts transportation, businesses, and everything. So it's a perfect storm in terms of the impact to the economy. And this is where I would say that looking in that context, looking at our current budget in that context, I personally feel that, you know, I applaud the government to put a bit of thoughts into the whole budget, because, you know, you can see the thing that the government was trying to do. One was, we need to sustain the economy. We need to pump in the money because there are people, life and livelihood that is, you know, being impacted. We have to make sure that the businesses are there for people to survive. And we also have to think about the future, post-COVID, the new normal. What is it that we got to prepare? So it's not a budget of just giving money, but it's also about giving money and how do we survive post-COVID. I think that's the part which I think is the part which I find you know, interesting about the budget. And to that extent, I think is a good budget that is very mindful, not about just spending money, but preparing us come 2021, revive back all the, you know, some of the projects that would be useful. And these are infrastructure projects that has direct economic impact to the businesses and whatnot. So we have MRT coming back, we have consideration for the high-speed rail and so on, so that money are pumped into the system. We're not giving money, you know, a packet of money into the business, but rather we are putting money into the economy so that business can thrive. That's important. But the other part, which to me, which is interesting, really, is investment on telecommunication infrastructure. We, in the post-COVID, we know, you know, the interesting part of this pandemic is that it is the single biggest incentive for people to adopt the internet. I mean, the last 10 years, we've been pushing for companies to embrace the internet, e-commerce and everything. And there was no urgency. But now under lockdown, you know, the silver lining in all things, I'm not trying to say it's a good thing, but, you know, the silver lining is everybody has to embrace, and the government is responding in kind, you know, giving very good incentive to the individuals, the families, giving better access to the internet and investing into the internet infrastructure. So, you know, I think that will stay with us post-COVID. Having a good, you know, internet infrastructure is going to be crucial for us to face the new normal. On top of that, talking to the industry and say, adopt digitalization. I think that is also crucial. And there's a lot of funds that's being put in place to incentivize industry. And I really, you know, like to see that industry take this in a big way, because, you know, we are a small nation, we are a trading nation. When logistics, when transport, when communication is put to a standstill, businesses still has to go. And the internet is one of the low point of entry for us to really utilize technology, for us to remain a trading nation. So I think that is crucial. Furthermore, you see, the interesting part is this perfect storm is also you know, the adage, the remark that I think people associated with Winston Churchill is that, you know, it's a crisis too good to waste. Yeah, so, you know, you got this opportunity to actually get the businesses to embrace technology, get them to look at adopting digitalization. The agencies like Matrix, for example, can play a great role in terms of linking the businesses to the global community, so that we pave new roads, new way to access to new markets. So I think it's a perfect solution. And then you see also the consideration of reskilling, focusing on TVET, focusing on you know, the new normal, where business will be done differently. That is where I think it's important. The price of oil, we know, you know, as long as the shale phenomenon is there, the shale gas is there, you know, shale is so different than conventional because it is a smaller capex and a shorter development period. So it's going to go, the cycle is going to go small and fast. So every time the price goes up, somebody will open up the new field and the price go down again. So I think you're going to see this $40 to $60 per barrel for quite some time, until as long as shale gas is there. So we cannot be dependent on oil. We cannot be dependent on single resource. We have to diversify our economy. We have to look at new ways of doing trade. And I think to some extent, the fundamentals in the budgets are addressing all of those. The challenge is, to me, the challenge is, yes, you're incentivizing R&D, but we know that just giving money for R&D is not enough. The whole infrastructure, the whole ecosystem need to support that. You give money to companies to go into R&D, but for every dollar that they spend, if they cannot turn that into a product that a market will buy, it's meaningless. So where is the market for developing this product? So that is another area where I think government machineries and the industry has to come together and say, hey, you know, if we have internal demand, for example, how do we latch between our R&D and our internal demand? Before we even talk about, you know, going international with supplying our goods, because we are not competing on equal footing here. You know, the developed nation has developed their technology way ahead of us, and they have a lot of time lead against us. And, you know, it's only fair, you know, to the local businesses that we have to some extent, help them to grow, to break the barrier before they can go on their own. So that is where I think it's critical for our post-budget activity to look at how we can help the economy. As long as the people funding provisions are there, the business has been given a bit of livelihood. We don't know how long. You see, the thing is, remember, although it is forecasted a 6% growth of GDP in 2021, right? But it is 6.1 based on a very low, already low GDP that has gone down. So it's a low base going up. So it's not, you know, comparing apple to apple here. That's one. Secondly is, if we fail at supporting the businesses, where on earth are we going to collect the taxes from to sustain future budgets? So it becomes a crucial thing to understand that it's so important that for people to survive, it's also extremely important for business to survive, and we also have to work out to make sure that we are prepared for the new normal. I'll give other people a chance to talk, so yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Dr. Sharin. We heard you that we have diversified enough from relying on oil revenue from 40% to just under 30% now. We hear you also that there will be greater volatility in the global oil market, which is also a concern by Mr. Kirk. We hear you that the right thing to do is to pump prime the economy via some infrastructure projects that has a multiplying effect. We also hear you that rescaling of a labor force, R&D investment is critical to find our market niche, as well as to broaden and diversify our economy in a more prudent manner. Thank you, Dr. Sharin, and we come back to you on more Q&A later. Alan, do you think the forecast of 6.5% to 7.5% is realistic for 2021? This number likely to be the guidance for many companies to draft their business strategy and also their investment strategy in 2021. Now, the last we want to see is that we put up a very optimistic growth number and we can't hit that, and the business suffer. So in your opinion, in your economic model, do you think the projection of 6.5 to 7.5 growth in 2021 from a lower base in 2020 of a contraction of 4.5% is something realistic?
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. I will answer your questions, but if I may, I just would like to highlight a few of my presentation slides, and it basically address some of the questions that you have raised earlier. When you look at the COVID-19 and the impact on the domestic economy, it started back in April when the country went into MCO, a complete lockdown nationwide. And during that time, businesses were, restricted in terms of operations. Some of the, factories were closed, and therefore the impact on the economy was really significant. In fact, based on the statistics from Department of Statistics, during April, the GDP growth on a monthly basis contracted by 28%. When the economy moved into CMCO, that was back in May, the contraction was smaller, but still drastic at 19%. And when the economy moved into RMCO back in June, that is where the GDP contraction was smaller, partly because people were now allowed to operate businesses. Most of the essential businesses were allowed to operate, factories were allowed to open, and therefore the economy starts to recover. But however, the second quarter GDP numbers shows that the economy contracted by 17.1%. The third quarter numbers will be out this coming Friday. And the expectation is that because the economy moved into RMCO, where factories, businesses, and people are allowed to go out from their houses, to go to the office to work, the third quarter GDP numbers will show a very small contraction, possibly in the region of -2 to -3. But the recovery also comes with the stimulus, the help from the government. And in this chart, what I'm trying to illustrate to you is that since March all the way to September, the government, the federal government, has put in place a large fiscal stimulus package totaling 305 billion, which is equivalent to 20.7% of the GDP. And when we look at previous downturns to the current crisis, the amount of stimulus that have been put into this economy to support the economy from falling deeper into recession has been quite substantial. It's even more than during the Asian financial crisis. In total, the 305 billion contribute close to 4 percentage points to the economy, and this will likely continue throughout third quarter and possibly going into the fourth quarter as well. But then again, your question to me is, with the current scenario where the economy is now, back to CMCO, where, recent announcement, the number of states now going into partial lockdown, all this I think will continue to drag the economy, but it's likely to be reflected in the fourth quarter GDP numbers. The third quarter GDP numbers, we believe, will still show pretty, good numbers, and therefore signaling that the stimulus packages that have been put in place has helped support the economy. Now, having all the stimulus package put in place, and with the current budget announcement, the questions that many people ask, and similarly what you have asked me, is the 6.5 to 7.5 GDP growth projection by the government realistic? Dr. Sharin highlighted a very good point, because this is coming from a low base. Second quarter GDP numbers contracted by 17.1%. Second quarter 2021 will see a jump. And therefore, statistically, the rebound has to do with the low base. And therefore, if we strip out the base impact, we still believe that the stimulus that have been put in, not just in 2020, but also looking at the budget 2021, the generous measure that has been put in place, we believe that this would continue to support economic growth going into next year. I don't think I can have time to highlight all the key measures, but I just want to point out 3 or 4 that we believe that will provide stimulus to the economy. One, obviously, is the cash assistance. Since March, we have seen the government putting money into households' pockets through cash assistance. And therefore, in the coming in this budget, another 6.5 billion has been allocated to 8.1 million recipients. This will help in terms of consumer spending. The other measure, obviously, is the wage subsidy program. It started off with Prihatin with an amount of 5.9 billion. Subsequently, another stimulus has been put in to help in the wage subsidy program of 7.9 billion. And similarly, in the budget that was just recently announced, another 1.5 billion has been allocated. So this will also help in terms of providing some stability to the employment situation in the country. For the M40 group, we saw government providing some incentive by cutting the income tax to those earning 50,000 to 70,000 by 1 percentage point from 14% to 13%. That would benefit about 1.4 million taxpayers. The other measure, of course, like what Mr. Kurt guided, is on the federal government development expenditure. Over the years, whenever the economy slows down, through the budget, the government would allocate higher spending for DE to support the economy. And therefore, this time around, we are seeing a massive 69 billion being introduced. And this will support construction activity, benefiting the small and medium-sized contractors going into 2021. And we know spending on DE would create that multiplier and therefore supportive of economic growth as well. These are some of the projects that I've listed down, but it has been highlighted earlier. We also saw the establishment of the COVID-19 fund. Assuming if the situation continue to deteriorate, that's COVID-19 and the duration of the lockdown, the CMCO extended, and more states being being enforced the CMCO, all this would have a drag on the economy. But with the COVID-19 fund established, government is able to provide substantial allocation channeled to the wage subsidy program and to some of the cash assistance. And this, I believe, is also another factor that would drive or support domestic demand going forward. So to answer your question, this chart basically illustrates to you that after the sharp contraction in the economy in 2020, the bounce to 6.5 to 7.5%, where the midpoint of 6.9% reflects a low base, but is also reflecting the amount of stimulus that have been put in place by the federal government, as well as the monetary policy, the accommodative monetary policy, where Bank Negara so far have brought down interest rate from 3% early this year down to 1.75 with a 125 basis point cut. Cumulative, it will support private consumption going into 2021 as well. So to answer your question, Mr. Tan, whether or not the country can achieve the 6.5 to 7.5, we believe that as long as external environment remains favorable. Just now, Mr. Kirk highlighted the IMF forecast. I have also a chart to illustrate to you on the IMF, not just IMF, World Bank, Asian Development Bank. the expectation is that the global economy will recover from the sharp contraction in 2020 to 2021. And when you look at the countries, the breakdown, we will see a synchronized global economic recovery where the US, Europe, Japan, and similarly China picking up in the year 2021. And Malaysia being a very open economy where we are reliant on exports, when advanced economies like the US, the Europe recovers, our exports would also pick up. And that would also lend support to domestic demand. And therefore, the possibility of a recovery next year, I believe, is realistic. However, it may come to the lower end of the official forecast at 6% or even 6.5%. But nevertheless, we will see economic activity recovering going into next year. This is the, as economists, year in, year out, the first thing we look at is on the federal government finances. And here it is very important for us to highlight to you on the operating position. Since 1987 up to now, the government's revenue, the collection from the government revenue, has always been enough to cover for operating expenditure to run an operating surplus. In 2020 as well as 2021, government is projecting an operating surplus, small surplus, but it remains a surplus, and that I believe will be, supporting the sovereign ratings and similarly providing some guidance that the government is committed towards fiscal consolidation when this crisis, returns to or recover from this current crisis. Mr. Kirk talked about the concerns about fiscal deficit. In the e-report, the government do provide some guidance that over the next 2 to 3 years, the fiscal discipline will be in place, and the government is committed to bring down the fiscal deficit to a more manageable level at about 4% of GDP. So this is something that will be implemented. Obviously, we know during times of crisis, there is a need for the government to provide, stimulus, support, and this is also to safeguard the government's revenue. Assuming a scenario where if the government do not step in with stimulus packages, and if the economy continue to deteriorate, I just want to give you some examples. When we compare the current downturn to the Asian financial crisis, during the Asian financial crisis, Malaysia's GDP growth contracted by 5 consecutive quarters, and it was double-digit contraction during the Asian financial crisis. Obviously, the banking systems were hurt, and similarly, the banks were also bogged down with high non-performing loans. But this time around, when you look at the crisis, the downturn or the contraction is only 1 quarter. In the second quarter of 2020, where GDP growth contracted by 17.1%. But because of the stimulus that has been put in, we believe that the recession that we are seeing may not be as sharp as what we saw during the Asian financial crisis. And the banks today are healthier, and the banks will continue to facilitate this economic recovery. But at the end, we have to look at, returning to normal. Don't get me wrong. What I'm trying to illustrate to you this evening is that we are not returning to normal anytime soon, but we are seeing economic recovery from the low, right? We are slowly seeing signs of recovery. We will only return to normal when there is a vaccine widely available for the public. Today, when you look at the statistics, yes, 6 vaccines has been approved for early but limited use. So far, we have not seen any being approved for full use. Even if there's a vaccine, like what Mr. Kurt mentioned just now from China, it will not be available to the public as a whole. It will be available to the frontliners. It will be available to the vulnerable groups. And therefore, the economy will only return to normal when the situations of a vaccine availability and being administered on the masses, then we will return to normal. But what I'm trying to end my presentation here by saying that even though we are recovering from the worst downturn in the second quarter of this year, we believe the government will still have to provide support through fiscal stimulus, as well as from the monetary policy, keeping interest rate low, providing ample liquidity so that it will complement both fiscal policy and monetary policy to sustain our economy from slowing down sharply. I'll stop here, Mr. Tan.
Thank you, Alan, for your very insightful explanation and illustration using charts on how we can achieve the projection growth of 6.5% to 7.5% in 2021 as projected by our government during the budget 2021 session. We do have some online question. If I may just read it out, perhaps you can help us to enlighten the audience. One of which is the unemployment rate of just under 5% in 2020, and we are projecting 3.5% in 2021. Am I right, Alan?
Yes, that's the official number.
Okay, the question is this number realistic? Again, we are talking about almost 32,000 SME businesses have folded since March. We also hear that people are laying off their employees, and especially the more affected industry like airlines, tourism, hoteliers, and so on. What is your thought on this?
Okay. In fact, this morning or this afternoon, Department of Statistics, they released the latest unemployment numbers. Yes, unemployment rate in Malaysia went up to a high of 5.3% in the month of May, but it has slowly improved to the 4.6% level in the month of September. And when we look at the unemployment situation, the first thing that we look at is, obviously we know, without the wage subsidy program that have been put in place by the government, the unemployment rate in Malaysia today would have been a lot higher than what was guided by Department of Statistics. Second point is that when you look at the economy, right, it is really moving from a very, very sharp downturn back in second quarter due to MCO. But when the economy moved into CMCO as well as RMCO, that is when businesses are allowed to operate. And most of the essential businesses today are also allowed to operate, right? So here, I understand the question. If the border remain closed, foreign tourists are not allowed to come into Malaysia, a substantial SMEs in the tourism related industry will be impacted. So if you were to ask me, in the budget that was just recently announced, what would I like to see? Yeah, maybe I would like to see more assistance to help those in the tourism related industries, because while domestic tourism can provide some offset, but because of the current CMCO, people are also traveling less domestically. So therefore, this segment of the economy, the tourism and the services related to tourism, will continue to be impacted. But having said that, manufacturing, and we are also looking at the number projected by government going into next year. Services sector is also expected to turn around. Just to share with you. And what is important here, services sector, after declining by -3.7, it will pick up to 7% in 2021. And therefore, we think that, yes, unemployment rate may trend higher, especially in the fourth quarter, but we don't believe that the unemployment rate would really, hit the 6% or even the 7% that was cautioned by some agencies back in March and April.
Thank you, Alan, for your affirmation on the explanation of how you arrive at your unemployment forecast. The other question is on the impact of lockdown on our economy. We were guided by the government that for each day of full MCO, the impact to the economy is between 2 to 2.4 billion ringgit. Am I right? Ballpark figure,
okay.
Right?
This is during the MCO.
That's right.
During the MCO.
What is your estimate during this CMCO, especially when Klang really was under CMCO? What is the impact, potential impact that is going to drag the GDP for 2020?
Okay. Like you mentioned, ballpark figure. We know when the economy went through the MCO, the contraction that I guided in the month of April, it was down close to 28%. When the economy moved into CMCO, GDP growth contracted by 19% in the month of May. So if we were to look at the current scenario, assuming we just take Selangor, KL, and also Sabah, these three states alone accounts for 50% of the Malaysian economy. And it started back in 18 October. And the CMCO will last until 8 December. So if we were to look at the impact, it will not be as sharp as what we saw back in April, May, because this is really less restrictive in terms of the enforcement on the movement control order. And therefore, if you were to ask me, I would probably think that in the fourth quarter, we'll see a 0.5 to 1 percentage point drag from the headline GDP numbers.
Okay, thank you, Alan, for your explanation on the impact to the CMCO currently. As we discussed earlier, and also being published, I believe in today's press, that the 32,000 SME, or rather more than 32,000 SME businesses have folded since March, with August being the biggest, with the 17,800 businesses closed down. And we know that SME play a very important role, be it providing employment or supporting the economic growth of a developing country like Malaysia. This segment is also the hardest hit during COVID-19 pandemic, where more than 30,000, as I mentioned earlier, companies are closed down since the beginning of MCO. Mr. Kong, if I may just move on to the next panelist. Mr. Kong, with your extensive background in providing advisory to SMEs in various sectors, do you think the measures announced in Budget 2021 is enough to help Malaysian SME to weather through the difficult time that we are facing now? Mr. Kong, over to you, please.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I'd like to share my slide. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, this will be a COVID-19 recovery budget for us, lah. Okay. And actually, if you're looking into the whole budgets, there is actually nothing much direct benefit going to what we so-called SME. Okay. And But the money, like for example, like the government is allowing the people to withdraw money from account one from EPF, and allowing the employer to reduce 2% of the employee portion of their salaries, and pumping the money will be pumping directly into the market. So then for us, I will look into SME. They have to help themselves, meaning if the money is already in the market, they will need to look for their ways to grab the money in the so-called free market. And it's not a direct feeding you the, I mean, it's like what we say normally, it's not direct feeding you, but you have to learn the way how to fish instead of asking the government to feed you. So that will be some impact for SME. So I think for the government funding this, the overview of economy, I think is already been shared by all the panelists earlier. So I will just go direct to those proposals that directly affecting the corporate and businesses. So the main point, there are 5 main points. Okay. If, for example, like just now also we're mentioning that there are a lot of unemployment, and unemployment is shooting up to like 5.3%. And I believe most of them will be for those people's like senior citizens, ex-convict, paralyzed, okay, supervised person, or ex-drugs dependents. But there are good news for them, because the government is extending. If you are recruiting these people as your employee with the remuneration lesser than 4,000, then the employer, they will have further tax deduction. So we will need to wait for further explanation from income tax later on. But that also been extended. Now they've been extended to, previously we only announced it and then allowing for YA 2019 and 2020. And this one will be further extended to 5 years, meaning will be extended to year 2024. Okay, so that means if your company, you are looking for those experienced person, okay, but they are with this criteria. So, but your remuneration have to be lesser than 4,000. If you recruit these people, you have a further tax deduction. So at least I think it will help in reducing the employment rate, and also with their experience, it will help the SME to grow. Okay, and there are also measures for those certain industry. So I think a lot of people notice that maybe we can do some I don't know whether you all can chat in a group. Maybe you all can what is what we so call the best industry at the moment? Any thoughts? What is the best industry at the moment? Okay. Yeah, maybe for the attendees, you all can put in what is the most so-called beneficial or so-called higher growth rate industry at the moment. Okay, let me see.
We have glove.
Yeah, glove. Oh, yeah. Agree. Okay. So online business. So all these are what currently the government been asking us to look into it. So I'm not asking you all to diversify all your business into digital glove, but you look into like recent trend, even Marsing. Marsing is actually a property developers moving into glove industry. Even like AT is also previously not in glove industry, moving into glove. So we can see the top tradings counters for these 2 to 3 days is all these healthcare industry, online e-commerce. Okay, so you see what government is trying to propose will be giving these kind of businesses, for example, like if you are manufacturing industries. So if you are moving your business, relocate your business from foreign country, from abroad to Malaysia, but you have to few criteria you need to fulfill, meaning your value of fixed asset investment have to be from 300 million. Is a very big figure. I agree, is a very big figures, but do look into it. Just now, Mr. Kurt also mentioning that if China is the first country that recover after this pandemic, so if we are the Asian country, we are able to help them, or we are able to ask them to relocate their business or to expand a bit of their business into Malaysia, I think easily you need this kind of investment amount, 300 million to 500 million or more than 500 million. And then it will work something like pioneer status, or below here, investment tax allowances. So they will be allowed for a zero tax for 10 to 15 years. And they'll be allowed if they invest into what we so-called our qualifying expenditure, meaning you are buying land, buying properties, buying machineries, and then they are allowing to deduct, okay, for their statutory income for 5 years. Okay, that is something that I think all the SMEs, or if you all have any connection with maybe China or even any abroad countries, okay, I'm not asking you to go direct into manufacturing of vaccine, but at least maybe you can do a bit of like some of Malaysian company, you do some packaging for them, you do some distribution for them. So even some listed company also going into that area, okay, and then they are, at least currently they are benefiting from the price increase in the share markets. So that will be the second point that the government like to highlight. And also not only in manufacturing industry, they've been extended to servicing, including if you are providing into Industrial Revolution 4.0 and digitalizations. Okay, so these are certain areas they've been extended, and the period also be extended to 31st December 2022. Okay, at least we still have 2 to 3 years to see how we can work into this industry. Okay. And all these for manufacturing industry, you need to go through MIDAS applications. Is of course it's not so easy, but at least we need to put our effort. Just as I mentioned earlier, we cannot wait until the government to feed us. We have to fish ourselves nowadays. Okay. Next will be also in pharmaceuticals. It's also been include vaccine at the moment. So I can foresee if Malaysia can attract these businesses to provide vaccines, okay, come into Malaysia, that will be benefit for Malaysians. And also what will be our benefit for these foreign manufacturers of vaccine coming into Malaysia? There will be a pioneer status, okay, similar to just now what I mentioned, 5 to 10 years of tax-free, okay, and also investment tax allowances. 60% of their qualifying expenditure will be allowable for deduction for their statutory income. Okay, statutory income is not our net profit. Is a bit technical, meaning after we deduct certain portion from our capital allowance from the net profit, and we add back certain things that not allowable for deductions, then it comes to a figure what we so-called a statutory income. So I'm not going to do that in detail here, but just to have some understanding, it's more or less our tax agent computation kind of statutory income. Okay, so for this pharmaceutical company, okay, now they've been proposing instead of 5 years tax-free, there will be a 0% or up to 10% for first 10 years. Or the income tax rate of the first 10% for the subsequent 10 years. So this will be for the SME years. See, maybe because Malaysia actually we have a one very good strength. Okay, I don't know whether you all notice or not. Malaysians are truly a friendly country. Anyone who come to Malaysia, they will notice that Malaysians we easy to make friends with others. So we should use this kind of diplomatic strength, okay, to attract those foreigners to come into Malaysia. Who knows? Maybe you are one of the introducer, and then you should be benefiting from that. Okay, I'm not asking you to go into direct into vaccine, but maybe into distributions or other services. Okay. So and then this need to apply with MIDA also. So next, another one. The fourth one will be just now I think also mentioned by Dr. Sharin. Okay. For any R&D, any findings, you need to commercialize it. Okay, commercialize means you need to either put in some effort into marketing. Okay, so in order for you to get any benefit from here, okay, government's allowing us to review and expand the scope of the tax incentive for commercialize our R&D findings. Okay, meaning anything that we are spending in marketings or those non-resources based R&D findings, or reintroduce it, or you've been expanding your what we so call your maybe your fundings into these private higher learning institutions. So these are also been allowable, okay, as promoting for the commercialization of these R&D findings. So meaning if you work together with some higher educations, okay, you commercialize it, those commercialization expenditure, you are able to have some deductions, okay, and not only for those so-called the higher learning institution, but also for the investor companies, okay. And the last but not least, okay, this year you need to apply with MIDA also, and there's also one very interesting things being introduced by government, which is if, for example, for those venture capitalists, okay, but these venture capitalists, you have to register with security commissions, and yeah, for this venture capitalist company, if you venture into a company, okay, you're actually allowed for tax deduction. That is the current situations. And same to those angel investors. Angel investors, if those projects are approved by creator funds, and you are also a person, okay, you are either you're a company or individual, you registered with security commissions, okay, you are able to invest into those projects and then also get tax deductions. So now the government tried to promote this kind of merger and acquisitions or investment kind of fundings behaviors. So they are even extended into invest into this so-called equity crowdfunding. So if you are invest into equity crowdfundings, but we have to wait for further explorations from these governments or the guidelines. Okay, so there should be a tax exemption, meaning if you are invested into a project, but only limited to 50,000, so you are able to use it as a deductions. Okay, but until a maximum of 10% of the aggregate incomes for your year as assessment. Meaning if your 1 year your aggregate incomes is 1 million, okay, you invest 100,000. Supposedly you are eligible for 100,000 tax deductions. Okay, tax or but looking into what government proposing, they are only allowed 50% or the investment amount of 50,000, limit to 50,000. Meaning at least there is a tax exemption. If any income from your investment, there will be a tax exemptions of at least 50,000 from there. Okay, so that will be roughly what the government's been trying to introduce, and then these are all the things that will be benefiting the SMEs. Okay,
thank you,
and,
Mr. Kong. Yes.
Yeah, I'll back to you, Tan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Kong, for the very detailed and very elaborative of some of the incentive provided under the budget 2021 for businesses, be it for local company as well as foreign companies.
Yes.
There is a question posted online that says, which I believe you have covered most of it. Perhaps you want to add a thing or two from there. What are the key factors that enable government to pull more high value technology FDI into Malaysia? I believe earlier you have covered quite a fair bit. You have anything to add, Mr. Kong?
It will be in those industry. I mean, just now I mentioned about healthcare. Also, I think just now also Dr. Sharon also mentioned something on other industry, for example, like Industrial Revolution 4.0, digitalization. These are all the areas that government's been looking forward. Okay.
Okay. Obviously, the Global Trading Center tax relief plus the
yes,
preferred tax, personal tax level for the intended expertise that Malaysia want to bring in. I believe those are the
they are allowing them to pay a tax of 15%. So this one actually is not the first time they've been introducing, but they've been trying to extend it.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I offer some thoughts there, Katie?
Sure, Dr. Shannon, please go ahead. Yes.
You know, we have to face the fact that Malaysia is, becoming relatively more expensive than our neighbors, majority of our neighbors, except for the one down south. Okay, so it's a very good incentive. Nevertheless, it's a good incentive. We should be doing encouraging, but I think we should be more focused on bringing in high value industry. And that's, I think, is important. We are not a big nation in terms of population. We are only about 30 odd million population. We don't have the kind of market where we want to go for low cost commodity items. We should really position ourselves. So if you were to ask me in terms of why would anybody want to come to Malaysia, it's really about human capital, talent. It's about infrastructure. It's about good governance. It's about political stability and those kind of things. Yeah, I mean, it has to be people friendly. It has to be investor friendly from that angle. The days when we compete on low cost labor, I think we cannot count on that too much these days. We should really incentivize, area where we can differentiate ourselves. I think, new area, for example, like aerospace, there's a lot of focus on that. We're trying to develop the aerospace industry. We have a very good, in this whole ASEAN region, we are connected by archipelagos, islands and everything. So the mode of transport in the future is going to be a lot on air industry. So, focus on those kind of area. The digital electronic sector is another area. We talked about, multimedia super corridors way ahead from everyone else. Where are we on that? I think those are areas that we should be looking at. Health industry, health tourism industry. We are the world, really voted #1 a couple of times as the leading health tourism industry. Especially, we have a lot of with a good relationship with China, for example. Whenever it is cold season in China, the well-to-do older people, they would like to come to the warmer place, and we have incredible facilities over here. So what I'm trying to say is there are targeted areas that we should focus on. We should really leverage on our strength. We can do a lot of more business with China, for example, on rubber-based products. Yeah, I mean, they're a big manufacturer of automobile, but they don't have rubber. So, rubber-based products in automobile will be a nice complement to whatever China is doing. We saw that things like this pandemic, natural rubber-based gloves, incredible growth, right? But hey, why stop just at gloves, right? I mean, what else can we do post-pandemic? You see, the thing is, we cannot afford to be reacting all the time. There must be a way. There are things that we react, but there are long-term things that we have to develop. We have to be mindful that, yes, we have to react. I mean, we don't have a choice in terms of circumstances we are put in. The perfect storm of global economy, global trade war, pandemic, oil crisis, and so on and so forth, right? Change of world leaders somewhere, right? We cannot be a victim, a prisoner to all of that. Those are something that we got to be mindful. But the direction, the national long-term direction needs to be in place. We need to always be mindful that we grew better than many developed nations because, 70 years ago, we invested a lot on education, a lot on talent development. That placed us in a good position. So, I mean, those are the kind of things to me that fundamental economics that we have to be mindful and not reactionary kind of thing. Again, moving forward, for example, post-pandemic, we know that the consequences if we don't get our businesses up in terms of our annual revenue, our GDP, our trade, and so on. I mean, we got to be prepared for that, yeah, because I think as a nation, as a small nation, we got to break away and not. We have 1.2 million businesses, and yet I would say like almost 90% are very local centric. We have not really ventured out beyond our borders, and yet we are in a globalized economy in the middle of ASEAN, and somehow we don't put that as a priority to move our economy forward. Just a thought.
Thank you, Dr. Sharing, for the additional input of yours. Very helpful. Like the old saying goes, what people don't have, we have it, and what people have, we do it better. I think that should be the approach for our businesses. We do have a couple more online questions, one of which is very interesting and just happened over the weekend. Recent US presidential election result, the impact on China and Malaysia. If I may direct this question to Mr. Kirk, I believe he's monitoring closely the US presidential election. Mr. Kirk, are you still on the line?
Hello. Yeah. Okay. I think to Malaysia, I think not much difference. I think we have been very close with the USA and China. We have no problem with the USA, but I think with China, they would have some difference, I think. Between Biden and Trump, I think the difference is that one is more predictable and the other one is unpredictable. Okay, you don't know what he's going to do, Trump. Okay, but I think Biden will be more predictable. Number one. Number two, the way they approach to each other, I think Biden will be more sophisticated, and Trump will be seems to be more uncivilized. Okay, if I may use the word. The other thing that I think the Vice President Harris, Miss Harris, I think is a very good. Kamala Harris, yeah. I think it's a very good combination, and I think that their diplomatic policy would change somehow to be more balanced and more friendly to not just his alliance, but also to his enemies like China, for example. But we cannot hope that their relationship will be back to normal like before. That is not possible because China has posed a threat to USA and become more and more competitive to USA, and is forecast to take over in terms of GDP by 2030. And I think because of this pandemic, China will overtake USA in terms of GDP even earlier than 2030. I myself will predict somewhere in 2028, perhaps, 2 years earlier, or even could be earlier. Depend very much on the containment of the pandemic. So in short, the relationship between China and USA was certainly better than before for a few reasons I mentioned, and also the other one is the trade. The trade war that had been created in 2018 actually suffered more for USA. Of course, China also suffered, but USA suffer more, and the prices of all the goods, commodities, is also going up. So as a result of that, USA citizens is suffering. So they don't get anything. And the tariffs that it imposed also don't benefit USA. All right, and that's the reason because of the sanction and the higher tariffs they impose on China. So China has come up with another new strategy called dual circulation economic model. That means China will continue to deal with overseas, with foreign countries, but at the same time, they are promoting domestic consumption. So their market is huge enough, 14 billion. Yeah? So what is that? 1.4, sorry, should be 1.4 billion, right? 14 亿, huh? 14 亿, huh?
Yeah, 1.4, that's correct, 1.4 billion, yes.
Yeah, 1.4 billion. So their domestic market is already big enough. They can survive by themselves. They don't have to depend on overseas. But of course, they advocate globalization, right? They will still continue to trade with other countries, but they are at the same time promoting their own domestic consumption. Yeah. So this is how I look at it. The relationship will be improving, but we're not back to very cordial and friendly relationship between China and the USA. Thank you.
Can I offer? Can I offer?
Sure, go ahead, Doctor. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah,
please.
I'm cautiously optimistic, lah. Okay. Put it this way. You know, one of the first remarks that I heard that came out from the new to-be president is he's gonna bring back America to the Paris Accord on environment. Yeah, you see, and in that sense, why I say I'm cautiously optimistic, because there are two things that is positive about that. One is when you talk about America being more sensitive on environment, hopefully it also means that they're not going to go and develop all the oil field regardless, and hopefully then the price of oil can stabilize. You see, our world oil consumption is about 100 million barrels per day, and when America start developing their shale, they add another 10 million barrels, and that is a 10% add into the global supply, and that's forced the price of oil goes down. And if you every time there's a fluctuation and you keep on opening up your valves and keep on pumping more, then you're going to drag the price of oil for some time lah. But if America is a bit more cautious and be a bit more environmentally sensitive, then hopefully that kind of reactionary kind of thing hopefully will be a bit more in control, and therefore the price of oil can stabilize a bit, hopefully. But having said that, since America started to become a net exporter of oil, the price of oil is no longer, a direct relationship. The inverse relationship correlation between dollar and price of oil is no longer as predictable. So it used to be there's an inverse correlation between US dollar and price of oil. But since America now become a net exporter, you see that is no longer as predictable as before. What that means is that, if you are investing into developing the oil, the cost of finance could be higher. It's a bit more a difficult, tricky position. So for us to go and develop more resources could also mean it's a bit more expensive. And if we are dependent on oil to sustain our economy, that has some impact lah. That's one. Yeah. Secondly is other than oil is trade lah. America is one of the biggest global trading nation and influence the whole economy. So if you got a more predictable and well-behaved global trade, then of course it's beneficial for us. So in a bigger perspective, I think the new president hopefully gives us a bit more predictability in terms of price of oil and global trade. If that happens, then hopefully I'm a bit more optimistic that the recovery on our side will be better lah. So hopefully that 6% is a bit more realistic if those two materialize.
Yeah, we certainly hope so, Dr. Sharin. Obviously, I do agree with what Mr. Kirk's view is on that. The China-US trade relationship will be better, which is being reflected after the announcement of the US president-elect that the renminbi has appreciated quite a fair bit from the mid-year of 7.1 to current level of 660. So it's a good sign between US and China. Earlier we spoke about, in the interest of time, we can only take one more question from online. Earlier they were talk about glove, PPE, logistic, healthcare, e-commerce as the winning industry during this pandemic era. Alan, if I may direct this question to you, you have any recommendation on the few sectors that's being raised by one of the participants? Alan,
okay.
Are you there?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're asking for tips, in other words.
when we look at the budget, it is a really broad-based. But if you were to ask me, the construction sector will likely be beneficial because of the infrastructure revival, and similarly, government allocating close to 69 billion into DE spending. So again, from that perspective, if the government is able to execute and implement those projects smoothly, we believe that the construction sector as a whole would benefit from the higher spending by the government, especially going into 2021. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Alan. In the interest of time, we actually 10 minutes overrun. Before we close the dialogue session, if I may pick one final thought from the panelists, you're given 30 seconds to answer this. Should you be granted with one wish list, what will be yours for budget 2021? Alan, if I may start with you.
Okay. Like I mentioned earlier, the industries that is most impacted by COVID-19 is really tourism related, and therefore, it would be good if we see more measures or incentives being given to the tourism related industries.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Sharin, what will be your wish list?
I think the money given in terms of maintaining livelihood and businesses, I think is a given. I think that's a responsibility to the government. I really hope that the government put a real serious effort in terms of empowerment and managing those funds that is more forward-looking, future-looking in terms of securing our economy for the future. Things like, for example, when you talk about R&D, it's not enough just putting R&D, but empower an agency to manage clear results, clear KPI, monitor it, and make sure it happens, because we cannot afford another 10 years and still reacting.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kong, your wish list, if you can share with us.
Okay, yeah, my wish list will be, because I've been dealing with a lot of SMEs, then a lot of SMEs actually they are not taking any actions. So I mean, even before the Penjana, the Prihatin, there have been a lot of grant, there have been a lot of WSP, there have been a lot of incentive been asking SMEs to go and apply. I mean, maybe you'll be surprising you all. A lot of them, they never apply. So my wish list is actually, hopefully all the SME, they have to look into their cash flow and think about their business model. And then if you really need to take action, please take action. Because I don't know, maybe Mr. Good can, later on you can a lot of people, they've been thinking that, I mean, the economy will revive next year. Yes, coming back, recover next year. But when next year? Now a lot of people already been saying that this year they've been wasting all their time this year. So you still got 2 months. So please look into cash flow or whatever, look for funds, whatever. Because I think we'll need to get ready until at least second quarter of 2021. So that will be my wish list. They have to look into their own business. Thank you.
I certainly agree with you, Mr. Kong, that the cash flow management is of most important. It has to be the number one thing to do. Yeah, especially at this trying time. Mr. Kang, over to you. You have any wish list that you'd like to share with us?
Okay. I hope that the public delivery could be further improved. Of course, if we are comparing with other developing countries, our public service, our government department, I would say quite okay. But since we are our government is overstaffed, we are actually compared to the population, we are having more government servants than any other countries, and therefore we have to improve the efficiency. As I said earlier, we are not bad, but we can improve further. And the government has been emphasizing this in the past few budgets. But I don't think there is very significant improvement. If the government's public delivery can be improved further and make it more efficient, I think we can attract more FDI. So this is my wish list. Thank you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, Mr. Kirk. That's a very good point. Ladies and gentlemen, we are slightly overrun. Obviously, 2021 will be a very challenging year, but not all doom and gloom. The deficit-driven budget, while it's appropriate to spur growth at this juncture, a more credible debt level management has to be instituted to reduce the debt servicing ratio. We have some concern on the funding issues. We have some concern on the unemployment rate as well, where consumption made out of 55% of our GDP. While some of the number projections are very optimistic, we have to be very vigilant and agile to respond to the volatile nature of our economic cycle right now. With that, and on behalf of MCCC, I'd like to thank our distinguished panelists again for taking time off to participate and provide valuable insights to tonight's Budget 2021 dialogue session. Most of all, thanks all the participations and all your questions. We are not able, our apology that we are not able to answer all of those. We try to reach out to you. The Secretariat obviously will try to reach out to you and provide some of the answers to you. Thank you again. Have a blessed night. 谢谢大家，晚安。Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.